Welcome to Newfoundland, easily the most photogenic and fascinating part of North America. From this easily accessible and dramatic Skirwink Trail on the Bonavista Peninsula to the western side with Rosemore National Park and the beautiful boat ride rimmed by waterfalls along the way. There's piles of wildlife here, bird sanctuaries, quite close access to puffins, and in the spring the capelin coming close to shore, the little fish chased in by humpback whales. Lots of cultural activity, weaving, quilting, woodworking, and of course there's always music nearby. Food is a big part of the culture here too, with some great restaurants and things to enjoy. Now, let's get one thing out of the way here. That thing. We're not going to be talking about that iceberg, but we will be talking about icebergs you can do things with. You can make beer out of it. You can buy it at the side of the road or make a great cocktail with ice slowly fizzing from 100,000 years of compressed air. The glaciers in Greenland are some of the oldest in the world. The icebergs that we see are from glaciers that are between 100,000 and 400,000 years old. As the glaciers thicken at the top, their weight moves them like a frozen river slowly down the valley on a slippery surface of stones and water. The weaker ledge of ice is undercut by warmer water from the ocean and eventually collapses in under its own weight. Dramatic but potentially dangerous mini tsunamis are created when these ledges collapse into the ocean. Cold North Atlantic currents carry these large blocks of ice up the west side of Greenland into the Canadian Arctic, where they pick up additional younger glacial ice from the Arctic islands, and they're brought back down through the cold Labrador Current and eventually to the northern tip of Newfoundland. And they generally melt by the time they get to the base of the Grand Banks. To everything there is a season, and that also applies to icebergs. The Government of Canada produces a weekly map showing the sea ice and iceberg movement along the coast. You can see during spring is the abundance. By summertime, it's come down to just occasional icebergs scattered and moving through the area. All the pictures, videos that I'll be showing here, though, I did take in late June and mid-July, so you can still see icebergs right through to the summertime. Of course, June through August is also Newfoundland's best weather, which is not insignificant. And the areas that I've chosen are great for wildlife, scenery, cultural events, as well as spotting icebergs. Don't let the short distances on a map deceive you. This is a big province, and these places are far apart. Starting at the most north corner of Newfoundland is the town of St. Anthony. Massive offshore icebergs break into smaller pieces that come into the shallower bays and get grounded. Just outside of St. Anthony is a steep hiking trail to the top of a mountain that you can scan it over these coves and look for any trapped icebergs that have come in. Then you can just look at a map and find a route to get close up, and sometimes they're within 100 meters of shore and are breaking into smaller pieces that you can get a piece of your own iceberg. It's also great fun to have a drone and fly it out over these icebergs because you can get so close to them. Knowing where these smaller icebergs are gives you a chance to go back in the golden hours of morning and evening when the lighting gives them far more dramatic color than the normal just blue sky and white ice. A small fish called capelin comes into these bays in early July in massive amounts. The entire ecosystem of birds, fish, seals, whales are feeding on them, and it's just a frenzy of activity. These humpbacks have come in within meters of shore, and they're in water that's barely deeper than what their body is, and they're going around icebergs. It was the most amazing thing. Just as that whale was leaving, the compressed air trapped inside that iceberg overstressed it, and the entire thing exploded, and I just about popped into the water myself. It was a pretty exciting moment. You need a boat to visit icebergs and whales, just a good tripod and a good map, and maybe a drone to get the ones that are close into shore. Our next stop is Fogo Island, accessible by a short ferry ride from the mainland. Fogo Island, of course, is home to the Fogo Island Inn, a hotel/inn iceberg ship sitting on a rock looking out over icebergs sailing by. The small bays on Fogo Island again trap icebergs very close by where they can be observed either from the hills to the side, or get a kayak or a boat and you can actually get up pretty close to them, of course aware that they may tip, but these ones are grounded at least in the bottom so they're not moving anywhere as they melt. And fill your cooler with a little bit of that delicious fossil blue ice. You will need a boat and a guide to take you to the offshore Little Fogo Islands. People are now returning to live completely off-grid in these little houses. They're a great way to see the ice and whales in the area because now you're really out more in the open waters with abundant puffins and seabirds. Next we visit historic Bonavista, first landing of English in 1497. This area has an abundance of parks, close access to wildlife, and fascinating towns going back hundreds of years that makes it extremely photogenic. There were dozens, if not hundreds, of icebergs when I was there in late June. Great weather, quite windy, but as far as seeing icebergs, it was an absolutely amazing sight. It's fun to get the human perspective when you're looking at these icebergs, to get a sense of scale from both the little bergy bits that float into beside people's houses to seeing the lighthouse at Bonavista framing an iceberg against its rocky shore, or even just the towns as the icebergs sail by and looking off into them. They create their own weather pattern. They're so cold they form fog around them, and quite interesting as the mists envelope the shape of the icebergs. They're constantly changing and moving in the sunlight and the wind and the waves moving them in the currents. Our last stop is St. John's, the capital of Newfoundland, or more accurately Cape Spear, which is just east of St. John's. There's a beautiful lighthouse at the end of the cape, and the bay in there often traps some pretty sizable icebergs. This particular one I visited in the evening just as the sun was starting to go down, and it was quite exciting. The cave-like shape of it was spectacular, and many of the locals were coming out having picnics and watching it. Quite exciting. The offshore breezes were fairly challenging for me to fly my drone in. It was a little nerve-wracking. Fortunately, the wind was coming off the water, but the lighting was beautiful. The turquoise of the water, the evening glow of the sun going down was coming off the iceberg, and it really was an absolutely fantastic spot to do my final iceberg spotting on Newfoundland. It's really a great place to do all kinds of things, icebergs being one of many. I hope you get a chance to catch some of these big beauties as well. Thanks for watching this video. Hope you enjoyed it.